Staff Sergeant Paige Brennan stood at the high school's front entrance, watching the last few students scatter across the parking lot. Her shoulders felt heavy after 2 hours of answering the same questions she'd heard 100 times before. But how can women really handle combat? Isn't the training too hard? She'd kept her professional smile firmly in place, explaining again and again that determination and skill mattered more than gender. Now, with the recruitment event finally over, exhaustion crept in. The thought of heading home to face another evening of watching her mother struggle made her chest tighten. She needed just a few minutes to herself, a quiet moment to rebuild her strength before stepping back into her role as caregiver. As she walked down the quiet street, a modest storefront caught her eye. Dragon's Den Martial Arts Academy read the simple sign above the door. Through the large windows, she could see students in crisp white uniforms moving in synchronized patterns. The familiar sight of disciplined training brought a small smile to her face. Without really planning to, Paige found herself pushing open the heavy glass door. The familiar scent of athletic mats and fresh sweat brought back memories of better days, of purpose, structure, and the simple satisfaction of physical training. A tall, lean man in his 40s looked up from where he was observing his students. His black belt, worn but well cared for, marked him as someone who'd earned his rank through years of dedicated practice. His eyes met Paige's, taking in her combat uniform shirt and pants with quiet recognition. "Welcome to Dragon's Den," he said, giving her a respectful nod. "I'm Marcus Chen, the owner." "Staff Sergeant Paige Brennan," she replied automatically, then added more casually, "Just looking for a quiet place to stretch, if that's okay." Marcus gestured to an open corner of the mat. "Help yourself. We're running an intermediate class right now, but there's plenty of space." Paige found a spot against the wall, far enough from the class to avoid being intrusive. As she began her familiar stretching routine, she watched the students working through their forms. Their movements weren't perfect. These weren't soldiers or professional fighters, but there was an earnestness to their practice that she appreciated. The steady rhythm of the class washed over her like a soothing wave. This was something she understood. The focus required to perfect a technique, the respect between teacher and student, the simple progression from one movement to the next. It was so different from the chaos of combat, yet it held echoes of the discipline that had shaped her military career. Marcus moved among his students, making small corrections with patient words and gentle adjustments to their stances. His teaching style reminded her of her first hand-to-hand combat instructor, firm but kind, demanding but encouraging. As she stretched, Paige felt some of the day's tension begin to ease. The knot of worry about her mother loosened slightly, allowing her to breathe more freely. Here, in this simple gym with its worn mats and mirrors, she found a familiar piece that had been missing since her return to civilian life. The class continued their practice, and Paige lost herself in her own quiet routine. Her muscles remembered the movements, flowing from one stretch to another with the smooth precision that came from years of training. For these few precious moments, she wasn't a soldier struggling to adjust to civilian life, or a daughter watching her mother fade away. She was simply a warrior practicing her craft. Marcus kept glancing her way between instructions to his students, noting her practiced movements and professional demeanor. There was a mutual understanding in those brief looks, one trained fighter recognizing another. No words needed to be exchanged. The language of martial arts spoke clearly enough. As the class wound down, Paige began gathering herself to leave. The brief respite had helped center her, giving her the strength to face the evening ahead. She caught Marcus's eye and gave him a grateful nod as she stood. "You're welcome back anytime, Staff Sergeant," he said quietly as she passed him on her way to the door. "Thank you," she replied, meaning it more than he could know. "This is a good place you have here." The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows as Paige stepped back onto the street. She squared her shoulders, ready now to return to her other duties. The Dragon's Den had given her exactly what she needed, a moment of peace in a familiar environment, a chance to remember who she was beyond her current struggles. The memory of the gym's quiet discipline would stay with her, a reminder that some things remained constant even when everything else changed. As she walked home, her steps were lighter, more purposeful. Sometimes, she realized, finding strength meant knowing when to step back and breathe, even if just for a moment. Marcus moved through his evening class with practiced efficiency, demonstrating a complex throwing technique to a group of attentive students. His movements were precise and controlled, the result of decades spent perfecting his craft. At the front of the class, Trevor Garrison mirrored his instructor's actions with fluid grace, his black belt marking him as the Academy's star pupil. "Notice how the hip rotation generates power," Marcus explained, gesturing to Trevor. "Show them one more time, please." Trevor executed the throw perfectly, his training partner falling safely to the mat. From the sidelines, his girlfriend Brittany clapped softly, her admiring smile reflecting the gym's fluorescent lights. She wasn't the only one watching. 3 men in business attire stood near the entrance, their attention focused entirely on Trevor's performance. They represented potential sponsors, here to evaluate the young fighter's Olympic prospects. "Beautiful technique," Marcus acknowledged, then turned to address the class. "Now pair up and practice. Remember, safety first." As the students spread out across the mat, Trevor's attention drifted to the corner, where Paige continued her solitary stretching routine. His eyes narrowed slightly as he watched her move through a series of precise exercises that spoke of extensive training. "Hey, Mike," Trevor said to his training partner, loud enough for nearby students to hear. "Check out the pretty soldier girl. Think she knows any real fighting, or just basic boot camp stuff?" Mike glanced uncomfortably at Paige, then back to Trevor. "Maybe we should focus on practice?" But Trevor was already moving on to his next partner, a newer student named Jason. "You know what's funny?" he said, deliberately projecting his voice. "Some people think military training makes them actual martial artists, like watching a few combat videos makes you an expert." More students were starting to notice his comments now. The earlier focused atmosphere began to dissolve as attention shifted between Trevor and the quiet soldier in the corner. Paige gave no indication she heard him, maintaining her steady rhythm of stretches. Marcus frowned as he noticed the change in his class's energy. He'd known Trevor since the young man was 15 years old, had watched him develop from a talented beginner into a legitimate black belt. But there was something in Trevor's voice now that set off warning bells, a hint of arrogance that had been growing alongside his increasing success. "Looking good, everyone," Marcus called out, trying to redirect focus back to training. "Remember to maintain proper distance when practicing throws." Trevor moved closer to where the sponsors were watching, making sure they could hear every word. "I bet she's never faced a real martial artist," he said to Brittany, who had moved to stand near him. "Military hand-to-hand is so basic compared to what we do here." "Trevor," Brittany whispered, looking uncomfortable. "Maybe you shouldn't. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." Trevor cut her off, his voice growing louder. "If you're going to come into a serious martial arts academy, you should be prepared to prove yourself." Marcus started moving toward Trevor, recognizing the dangerous direction this was heading. But before he could intervene, Trevor had already turned fully toward Paige. "Hey, soldier girl!" Trevor called out, his challenge ringing through the now quiet gym. "Want to show us what the army taught you? I promise to go easy." The sponsors leaned forward, their interest piqued by this unexpected development. Brittany stepped back, her face showing clear discomfort with her boyfriend's behavior. The other students stopped their practice entirely, forming an impromptu audience for what was unfolding. Marcus reached Trevor's side and spoke in a low, stern voice. "That's enough. She's a guest here." "Come on, Sifu Marcus," Trevor replied, using his instructor's formal title but with a hint of dismissal in his tone. "It would be good for everyone to see the difference between military basics and real martial arts. Plus," he added with a gesture towards the sponsors, "it could be entertaining." Throughout all of this, Paige had continued her stretching, each movement deliberate and controlled. But there was a new tension in her shoulders now, a subtle shift in her bearing that Marcus, with his years of experience, recognized as the alertness of a trained fighter becoming aware of a threat. Trevor stood in the center of the mat now, playing to his audience. "I'll even let you throw the first punch," he announced to Paige's back. "Seems only fair since you're just a visitor here." The atmosphere in the gym had transformed completely. What had started as a normal evening class had become charged with anticipation. The sponsors whispered among themselves, clearly intrigued by this unexpected show. Brittany had backed away entirely, her earlier admiration replaced by visible concern. Marcus could feel control of his class slipping away. He'd seen this kind of scenario before, a skilled fighter's ego leading them to underestimate an unknown opponent. But something about Paige's continued calm, the professional way she'd carried herself since entering the gym, told him this situation was more dangerous than Trevor realized. The young black belt, however, seemed oblivious to these warning signs, too caught up in his own performance. He bounced lightly on the balls of his feet, showing off his mobility for the sponsors while continuing to direct challenging comments toward Paige. "Last chance, soldier girl," Trevor called out, his voice filled with mock politeness. "Want to show us what you've got? Or are you just here to stretch?" Trevor planted his feet in the center of the mat, hands on his hips, and raised his voice even louder. "How about a friendly sparring match, soldier? Show us what the army's teaching these days." His words echoed through the now silent gym. Paige completed her final stretch before turning to face him. "No, thank you," she said quietly. "I'm just here to work out." "Oh, come on." Trevor's grin widened as he played to his audience. "We're all friends here. Don't tell me you're just playing soldier." He bounced on his toes, throwing a few flashy shadow punches. "I mean, what's the point of wearing that uniform if you can't back it up?" Several students shifted uncomfortably. Marcus stepped forward again, his expression stern. "Trevor, that's enough." But Trevor was too focused on his performance to heed the warning. "I promise to keep it light," he continued, winking at the sponsors. "Just a little demonstration of real martial arts versus basic training moves. You know, the kind they teach in those 2-week combat courses." Paige stood perfectly still, her face neutral. "I appreciate the offer, but I'll pass." "Makes sense," Trevor said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Must be tough knowing you're not really qualified. I mean, let's be honest. All that talk about women in combat roles?" He laughed, playing to the crowd. "We all know it's just a political correctness experiment. They probably gave you that uniform just to make the recruitment posters look good." The gym fell completely silent. Even the sponsors stopped their whispered conversation, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Brittany covered her mouth, eyes wide with embarrassment. Paige turned slowly to face Trevor. Something had changed in her bearing, a subtle transformation that made several students take an instinctive step back. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured. "You seem very interested in testing your skills," she said quietly. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Trevor's grin widened, mistaking her tone for uncertainty. "Absolutely. Come on, soldier girl. Show us what you've got. I'll even let you keep your boots on." Marcus made one final attempt to intervene. "This isn't appropriate." "It's okay, sir," Paige interrupted politely. She began methodically removing her watch and placing it aside. "If Mr. Garrison wants to spar, I accept." Trevor bounced excitedly, throwing more shadow punches. "Now we're talking. Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Wouldn't want to mess up that pretty uniform." The students automatically backed away, forming a circle around the mat. Paige stepped forward with the same calm precision she'd shown during her stretches. There was nothing flashy about her movement, no bouncing, no showing off. She simply took her position, hands relaxed at her sides. "Standard point sparring rules?" Trevor asked, still playing to the crowd. "Or are you only trained in marching and saluting?" "Your gym, your rules," Paige replied evenly. Marcus looked between them, recognizing he couldn't stop this now. 3-minute round, he announced reluctantly. "Light contact only." Points for clean strikes. I'll referee. Trevor settled into an elaborate fighting stance, still grinning. Ready when you are, soldier girl. Show us what the army's been wasting taxpayer money on. Paige simply nodded, her stance subtle but balanced. The contrast between them was striking. Trevor's theatrical display against Paige's quiet readiness. Remember, Marcus called out. This is just sparring. Keep it controlled. He looked at Trevor meaningfully, but the young black belt was too busy winking at the sponsors to notice. Don't worry, Trevor announced loudly. I'll make this educational. Maybe after this, she can go back to her recruiting office and tell them to start teaching real fighting instead of just... Marcus raised his hand to begin the match. Fighters ready? Trevor nodded enthusiastically, bouncing on his toes. Paige gave a single, professional nod. Begin. Trevor launched forward with a flashy spinning kick, his form perfect for the sponsors watching from the sidelines. But Paige wasn't there anymore. She had shifted, just slightly, letting the kick sweep past her with millimeters to spare. The black belt's eyes widened in surprise. He recovered quickly, throwing a rapid combination of punches that would have impressed any tournament judge. Yet somehow, Paige's subtle movements made each strike miss by the smallest margin. She wasn't blocking or parrying, she simply wasn't where his fists expected her to be. Stop playing around, Trevor growled, his showman's smile slipping. He pressed forward with another series of attacks, each more aggressive than the last. Paige remained eerily calm, her movements minimal and precise. Where Trevor used grand, sweeping techniques, she responded with small adjustments that seemed to flow like water around his attacks. The contrast was striking, his theatrical style against her ruthless efficiency. The gym had fallen completely silent. Even Marcus stood transfixed, his role as referee momentarily forgotten as he watched the display unfolding before him. The sponsors leaned forward in their seats, their expressions shifting from polite interest to intense focus. Trevor's frustration mounted with each failed attack. His techniques, which had won him countless tournaments, seemed to dissolve against Paige's defense. Sweat began to bead on his forehead as his movements grew wider, less controlled. Fight back, he demanded, launching a powerful roundhouse kick. Paige chose that moment to respond. Her hand snapped up, catching his leg mid-kick. Before anyone could blink, she had stepped forward, her hip pivoting slightly. The movement looked deceptively simple, almost gentle, but Trevor suddenly found himself airborne. The impact when he hit the mat knocked the wind from his lungs. He rolled instinctively, trying to regain his feet, but Paige was already there. Her foot swept his legs from under him, and he crashed down again. This time, she followed him to the ground. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. Trevor, a skilled grappler with years of training, found himself caught in a web of control points that negated every escape attempt. Each time he moved to counter, Paige had already transitioned to a new position of dominance. It was like fighting a shadow, one that always seemed to know his next move before he made it. Tap out, Paige said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make her point clear. Trevor struggled for another moment before reluctantly tapping her arm. She immediately released him and stood up, offering her hand to help him rise. The entire exchange had lasted less than 30 seconds. The silence in the gym was absolute. Students who had been recording the match on their phones stood frozen, devices still raised. Brittany's mouth hung open in shock. The sponsors whispered urgently to each other, pointing at the mat where Trevor was slowly getting to his feet. Marcus found his voice first. That was impressive, he managed, looking at Paige with new understanding. She nodded politely, already moving to collect her watch from the edge of the mat. Her movements were as calm and controlled as when she'd first walked in, showing no sign of exertion or excitement. Trevor stood in the center of the mat, his face flushed with a mixture of shock and embarrassment. How did you... He started, then stopped, unable to find the words. Thank you for the match, Paige said simply. She turned to Marcus and bowed slightly, respecting the dojo protocol. Then, without another word, she walked toward the exit. The gym members parted automatically to let her pass, staring at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. A few students started to whisper among themselves, phones already sharing the video of what they'd just witnessed. Just before reaching the door, Paige paused. Without turning around, she spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. "The Army doesn't waste money on training, Mr. Garrison. We just don't waste time showing off." The door closed behind her with a quiet click, leaving the gym in stunned silence. Trevor remained rooted to the spot, his carefully cultivated image shattered in less than a minute by a woman he'd thought would be an easy target for his showmanship. Marcus looked around at his students, seeing the same shocked expression on every face. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, a display of combat efficiency that went far beyond normal martial arts training. In those brief moments, Paige had demonstrated a level of skill that made Trevor's tournament techniques look like a child's game. The sponsors were already gathering their things, their excited whispers carrying across the quiet gym. Trevor watched them leave, the reality of what had just happened finally sinking in. His girlfriend Brittany approached hesitantly, but he waved her away, his face burning with humiliation. The evening class was effectively over. Students clustered in small groups, replaying videos of the match on their phones, analyzing every moment of Paige's devastating demonstration. The footage would soon spread beyond the gym's walls, carrying with it the story of how a quiet soldier had systematically dismantled their star student without breaking a sweat. The heavy thud of gym bags hitting the floor punctuated the shocked silence that followed Paige's departure. Students huddled in tight circles, heads bent over glowing phone screens as they replayed the footage of Trevor's defeat. Their whispers grew louder, filling the space with a steady buzz of conversation. "Did you see how she moved?" one student muttered, rewinding the video for the third time. "It's like she knew what he was going to do before he did it." Trevor stood alone in the center of the mat, his face burning red as he watched his girlfriend Brittany talking with the sponsors near the entrance. Their concerned glances in his direction told him everything he needed to know. Years of carefully built reputation were crumbling around him. "Trevor," Brittany called out, her voice tight with worry. "The sponsors want to reschedule next week's meeting. They said they need time to reevaluate their position." He turned away, unable to face her or anyone else. His hands clenched into fists as he heard the sponsors' footsteps retreating toward the door. Everything he'd worked for was slipping away because of one stupid challenge. Across the room, Marcus Chen sat at his desk, his fingers flying across his keyboard. The name Staff Sergeant Paige Brennan yielded several results. Newspaper articles about Special Forces training programs, military award ceremonies, and combat zone deployments. His eyes widened as he read about her distinguished service record and specialized combat training. 3 tours, he whispered to himself, scanning the articles. Multiple combat disciplines, specialized operations. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of someone far more skilled than a typical soldier. Meanwhile, Trevor had retreated to the locker room, pulling out his phone with trembling hands. He dialed his father's number, desperately needing someone who could help him fix this mess. "Dad," he said when Harrison Garrison answered. "Something happened at the gym. I need your help." "What's wrong?" Harrison's voice was sharp, immediately alert to the distress in his son's tone. Trevor's mind raced, reconstructing the events in a way that wouldn't make him look weak. "This female soldier came in today. She was watching the class, and I offered to spar with her, to be welcoming." He swallowed hard. "But she went crazy, Dad. Used some kind of military combat moves. It wasn't a fair match at all." Harrison was silent for a moment, processing this information. "The sponsors were there." "Yes," Trevor admitted, his voice cracking. "They saw everything. They're already talking about pulling their support." "Stay there," Harrison ordered. "I'm coming to the gym. We'll handle this." Trevor hung up and leaned against the lockers, his mind spinning. He couldn't let everyone think he'd been beaten fairly. The story was already forming in his head. How the soldier had used excessive force, how she'd ignored his attempts to yield, how she'd deliberately tried to hurt him. It wasn't exactly true, but it felt better than admitting he'd been completely outclassed. 20 minutes later, Harrison Garrison's expensive sedan pulled into the parking lot. He strode into the gym like he owned it, his presence commanding immediate attention. Marcus looked up from his research, instantly wary of the real estate mogul's unexpected appearance. Harrison found Trevor in the office, where his son had been hiding from the few remaining students. "Tell me exactly what happened," he demanded, closing the door behind him. As Trevor recounted his version of events, Harrison's expression shifted from concern to calculated interest. His eyes drifted to the walls of the office, taking in the lease agreements and property documents pinned to the bulletin board. "This could actually work in our favor," Harrison mused, interrupting Trevor's story. "If this soldier really did use excessive force—" "She did," Trevor insisted quickly, catching on to his father's tone. It was completely inappropriate for a friendly sparring match. Harrison nodded slowly, a plan forming. The gym's insurance rates would skyrocket if there was a formal complaint about dangerous training practices, especially with video evidence of a military-trained fighter attacking a student. But that's not exactly what... Trevor started to object, but Harrison cut him off. "It's exactly what happened," his father said firmly. "You offered a friendly match, and she responded with unnecessary aggression. That's the story, and we're sticking to it." Trevor hesitated, then nodded. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was better than admitting he'd been beaten by a woman in front of his sponsors and students. Besides, his father had never steered him wrong before. Harrison pulled out his phone, already scrolling through his contacts. "I'll have our lawyers draft something up. In the meantime, start posting on social media about how you're recovering from the incident. Make it clear you were the victim here." Through the office window, they could see Marcus still at his computer, thoroughly absorbed in his research about Paige. Harrison watched him with calculating eyes, seeing an opportunity he'd been waiting for. "This might be exactly what we needed," he said quietly, more to himself than to Trevor. A legitimate reason to pressure the old man into selling. Trevor looked at his father, understanding dawning in his eyes. The humiliation of his defeat began to fade, replaced by the realization that they could turn this disaster into an advantage. He pulled out his phone and opened his social media accounts, ready to start sharing his carefully crafted version of events. Trevor paced in the locker room, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in hushed tones. "Listen, Miguel, I know your work visa is still pending. It would be terrible if someone reported any irregularities to immigration." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "All you need to do is confirm that you saw her using dangerous military moves. That's it." Miguel's voice trembled on the other end. "But Trevor, she was just defending herself." "She was out of control," Trevor corrected firmly. "That's what you saw, right?" After a heavy silence, Miguel agreed. One by one, Trevor worked his way through the gym's membership list. For Lisa, it was the reminder that he knew about her ongoing bankruptcy proceedings. For David, it was the threat of revealing his underground fighting income to the Athletic Commission. Each call left him feeling more powerful, more in control of the narrative. At his desk in the main office, Marcus Chen's eyes widened as he scrolled through another article about Staff Sergeant Paige Brennan. The screen displayed a photo of her receiving a commendation, standing proud in her dress uniform. The article detailed her role in a classified operation that had saved dozens of lives. 3 tours in specialized operations. Marcus muttered, making notes. Advanced training in Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai. He sat back, understanding now why her movements had seemed so precise, so lethal. This wasn't just a soldier who knew some basic combat moves. This was someone who had mastered multiple fighting disciplines under real-world conditions. Trevor's first social media post appeared just as Marcus was finishing his research. The gym owner's phone buzzed with the notification. "Still shaken after today's incident at Dragon's Den. Never expected a simple sparring invitation to turn violent. Military training should come with a warning label." dangerously aggressive and illegal techniques. The post quickly gathered comments. Can't believe she attacked you like that. Military personnel should stick to their own facilities. This is why combat veterans need mental evaluations before joining civilian gyms. Marcus watched in growing dismay as more testimonies appeared. Miguel posted about dangerous military techniques he'd witnessed. Lisa shared a dramatic account of feeling terrified during the encounter. David wrote about how Trevor had clearly tried to yield, but Paige had kept attacking. The lies spread faster than truth could follow. Local community forums picked up the story, debating whether combat-trained veterans posed a risk in civilian spaces. Some called for martial arts academies to implement screening procedures for military members. Harrison Garrison's influence became apparent as local news websites began picking up the story. Headlines appeared: Olympic hopeful injured by military veteran in gym incident, and debate rises over military combat training in civilian spaces. Trevor continued orchestrating his campaign from the gym's office, now transformed into a command center for his disinformation effort. His girlfriend Brittany sat beside him, helping craft posts that painted him as an innocent victim, while subtly questioning the wisdom of allowing military personnel in civilian training facilities. Make sure you emphasize how welcoming you were trying to be, Harrison advised, reviewing their latest post. It makes her look more unstable by contrast. Marcus found himself torn between his business partnership with Trevor and his growing certainty about what had really happened. The security footage showed the truth clearly. Paige had been controlled and professional, using only the necessary force to end the confrontation quickly. A new wave of comments flooded social media. Just watched the video. Clearly excessive force. This is what happens when you let trained killers into normal gyms. She should be charged with assault. Marcus noticed how Trevor had carefully edited the video clips he shared, cutting out his provocative comments and focusing only on Paige's decisive takedown. The manipulated footage made her measured response look unnecessarily aggressive. Through his research, Marcus discovered more about Paige's distinguished career: citations for valor under fire, commendations for saving fellow soldiers, and multiple awards for excellence in specialized combat training. The woman he'd seen in his gym wasn't just any soldier. She was among the most highly trained operators in the military. This is wrong, Marcus said quietly, watching another distorted post gain hundreds of shares. She's a hero, and they're turning her into a villain. But the social media momentum had already taken on a life of its own. The controversy grew beyond just Paige and Trevor, sparking heated debates about military veterans in civilian society. Some argued for separate facilities for combat-trained personnel, while others defended veterans' rights to integrate into civilian life. Trevor sat back in his chair, satisfied with the chaos he'd created. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications as his story spread further. The truth about his humiliating defeat was buried under an avalanche of manufactured outrage and false testimonies. "See?" Harrison said, squeezing his son's shoulder. "Sometimes a setback is just an opportunity in disguise. By this time tomorrow, everyone will have forgotten about you losing the match. They'll only remember the dangerous military veteran who attacked an innocent athlete." Marcus closed his browser window, his jaw tight with frustration. The truth about Paige's heroic service record and exceptional abilities was right there in front of him, but it was being drowned out by Trevor's carefully orchestrated campaign of lies and manipulation. The morning news blared from the small television in the military recruitment office break room. "Controversy continues to grow over the incident at Dragon's Den Martial Arts Academy," the anchor announced. "Questions are being raised about the integration of combat-trained military personnel in civilian spaces." Paige sat rigid in her chair as Colonel Matthews switched off the TV. Her commanding officer's face was etched with concern as he turned to face her. "Staff Sergeant Brennan, this situation is becoming a public relations nightmare," he said, his voice tired. "We've received calls from 3 different news stations, and the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office is asking questions." Paige's hands tightened in her lap. "Sir, I followed every protocol. I didn't escalate the situation. I only responded when I believe you." Colonel Matthews interrupted, holding up his hand. But perception matters. Recruitment numbers are already down 15% since this story broke. Parents are calling, worried about their kids entering a military that trains dangerous fighters who can't control themselves. He quoted the words with obvious distaste. Her phone buzzed again, another message from the hospice nurse caring for her mother. The radiation treatments weren't going well. Her mother needed her, but instead she was here, defending herself against lies. There's more, Colonel Matthews continued. We just received notice that Trevor Garrison is filing formal assault charges against you. Paige felt the blood drain from her face. Assault charges? But he challenged me. There were witnesses, who are all supporting his version of events. The colonel finished. His father has connections with Judge Harrison in the district court. They're pushing for an expedited hearing. The implications hit Paige like a physical blow. A conviction would mean discharge from the military, loss of benefits, loss of the medical coverage that was keeping her mother alive. Across town, Trevor sat in the polished offices of Garrison Real Estate Development, watching his father work the phone. Yes, Judge Harrison, we appreciate your attention to this matter, Harrison Garrison said smoothly. The video evidence clearly shows the excessive force. Yes, we have multiple witness statements. Of course, we understand the sensitivity of cases involving military personnel. Trevor smiled, scrolling through the growing media coverage on his phone. His carefully crafted narrative had taken root. Local news websites featured headlines like Olympic dreams shattered by military aggression and veterans combat training a public safety concern. Harrison ended his call and turned to his son. The judge will expedite the hearing. The witness statements from the gym members are compelling, especially given their apparent reluctance to testify against a soldier. Makes their accounts seem more credible. They didn't have much choice. Trevor smirked, remembering how easily they'd folded under pressure. Amazing what people will say when they have something to lose. The military can't ignore formal charges, Harrison continued. Even if she's eventually cleared, the investigation alone will damage her career. And with the media attention, he spread his hands, indicating the inevitable fallout. Back at the recruitment office, Paige received another text from the hospice nurse. Your mother's asking for you, having a difficult day. Colonel Matthews watched her check the message, his expression softening. I know about your mother's condition, Staff Sergeant. Take the rest of the day, be with her. We'll deal with this situation tomorrow. Paige stood, her military bearing perfect despite the turmoil inside. Thank you, sir. But what about... We'll handle it, he assured her. The JAG office is already reviewing the case. Just be careful. Don't make any public statements. Don't post anything online. Let the legal team do their job. As Paige drove to the hospice facility, her car radio seemed to mock her with news updates about the growing controversy. Every station seemed to be discussing the dangers of combat-trained veterans in civilian spaces. Her phone rang. The hands-free display showed it was Marcus from Dragon's Den. She let it go to voicemail. He'd been trying to reach her, probably to protect his business from the fallout. She couldn't blame him. Trevor's assault charges landed on her desk the next morning. The legal document was thick with witness statements. Gym members she'd barely interacted with now claimed they'd seen her use illegal military combat techniques and continue attacking after Trevor had tried to yield. The JAG officer assigned to her case, Captain Sarah Rivera, reviewed the charges with growing concern. They're pushing for this to be handled in civilian court rather than through military channels. With the public attention and the witness statements, they're lying, Paige said quietly. Every one of those statements is a lie. I believe you, Captain Rivera replied. But proving coercion is difficult, especially when the witnesses won't admit to being pressured. And the edited video they're using makes the takedown look much more aggressive than it was. Paige's phone buzzed again, another update from the hospice. Her mother's condition was deteriorating faster than expected. The doctors wanted to try an experimental treatment, but it would only be covered under her military medical benefits. What are my options? Paige asked, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. Captain Rivera laid out the harsh reality. If this goes to civilian court and you're convicted, the military will have no choice but to discharge you. Even if you're cleared, the investigation and media attention could impact your career advancement, and if they push for a dishonorable discharge. She didn't need to finish. Paige knew what that would mean. No benefits, no medical coverage for her mother, no pension. Everything she'd worked for, everything she needed to care for her family, gone because of one entitled athlete's wounded pride and his father's influence. Marcus Chen sat alone in his office long after the evening classes had ended, rewinding the security footage for the 10th time. Something about Trevor's story didn't add up. On the grainy video, he could clearly see Paige's controlled movements, her precise technique, and most importantly, her immediate stop when Trevor tapped out. "That's not assault," he muttered, pausing the frame. "That's textbook control." He pulled out the written statements Trevor had collected from other gym members. Reading them again, the inconsistencies jumped out. Mike Thompson claimed Paige had continued striking after Trevor surrendered, but the video showed no strikes at all. Sarah Jenkins described illegal military holds, yet the techniques Paige used were standard Brazilian jiu-jitsu moves that Marcus taught in his own classes. The next morning, Marcus arrived early to catch Mike before the morning class. He found the younger man stretching in the corner, the same spot where Paige had been that fateful evening. "Mike, can we talk about your statement?" Marcus asked quietly. Mike's face tightened. "I told Trevor everything I saw." "Did you?" Marcus pressed. "Because the security footage shows something very different from what you described." Mike glanced nervously at the door. "Look, I can't. Trevor knows about my visa problems. He said his father could make things difficult with immigration." Marcus felt his stomach twist. One by one, he spoke with other gym members who had provided statements. Each conversation revealed similar stories of pressure and threats. Sarah Jenkins admitted Trevor had threatened to expose her financial troubles to her employer. Jason Martinez confessed that Trevor had promised to make his brother's pending legal troubles disappear if he supported the story. "I'm sorry, Master Chen," Jason said, his eyes downcast. "Trevor said his father would have his brother's charges dropped. We couldn't risk saying no." During his afternoon break, Marcus noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street. A man in an expensive suit was taking photos of the building. Something about it raised his suspicions. He copied down the license plate number and called a friend who worked at City Hall. "That plate belongs to a vehicle registered to Garrison Real Estate Development," his friend told him. "They've been busy lately. Just filed some interesting paperwork regarding your block." Marcus's heart sank as his friend explained further. Harrison Garrison had been quietly buying up neighboring properties for months. The development company had already submitted preliminary plans to convert the entire block into luxury condominiums. "They can't force me to sell," Marcus said. "No, but they can make it impossible for you to stay. And with all this controversy about dangerous fighters at your gym." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Marcus pulled up the local news coverage on his computer. Every story about Paige emphasized the dangers of having a martial arts academy in a residential area. The comment sections were filled with concerned citizens questioning whether such businesses belonged in family neighborhoods. It was never about Paige, Marcus realized. They're using her to get rid of the gym entirely. He dug deeper into his files, reviewing his business partnership agreement with Trevor. The young fighter had pushed hard to be made a partner 6 months ago, right around the time Harrison Garrison had started buying nearby properties. At the time, Marcus had been proud to share ownership with his star student. Now he saw it for what it was, a way to control the gym's fate from the inside. That evening, Marcus found an envelope slipped under his office door. Inside was a formal offer from Garrison Real Estate Development to purchase the building. The amount was insultingly low, but the implied threat was clear: sell now or watch the gym's reputation be destroyed by the growing controversy. Marcus sank into his chair, surrounded by the memories of 20 years teaching martial arts. Photos of students who had grown up in his classes lined the walls. Trophies and championship belts sat in glass cases, including several won by Trevor himself. The betrayal cut deep. He had trained Trevor since the boy was 12 years old, watched him develop from an unsure teenager into a confident black belt. He had supported Trevor's Olympic dreams, invested countless hours in his training, even made him a business partner. And all along, Trevor had been helping his father plan the gym's destruction. Marcus picked up a framed photo from his desk, Trevor's black belt ceremony. The proud smile on the young man's face seemed mocking now. How long had this been planned? How many other schemes had father and son orchestrated while pretending to support the gym? His phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Dad says to take the offer. It's more than you'll get once the media coverage kills enrollment. Marcus set the phone down without responding. He turned back to his computer, pulling up the security footage again. This time, he wasn't just looking for evidence to help Paige. He was looking for a way to save his life's work from the people he had trusted most. The betrayal stung, but it also brought clarity. This wasn't just about one soldier being falsely accused. This was about wealthy developers using that accusation to destroy a community institution. Marcus began copying the security footage and downloading emails, text messages, and business records. If Harrison and Trevor Garrison wanted a fight, he would show them what a true martial artist was capable of. Marcus spread dozens of documents across his office desk, creating a web of evidence that revealed the true scope of Harrison Garrison's schemes. Property records showed how Harrison had systematically acquired buildings throughout the neighborhood, using tactics that went far beyond normal business practices. Look at this pattern, Marcus explained to his friend David, a local business owner who'd recently lost his restaurant. Before each purchase, there were mysterious health code violations, electrical problems, or sudden insurance issues. David nodded grimly. Same thing happened to me. First, our insurance rates tripled overnight. Then building inspectors showed up 3 times in 1 week. Finally, my delivery trucks kept getting parking tickets until we couldn't operate. Marcus carefully documented each story, building a file of Harrison's pressure tactics. 5 different business owners shared similar experiences, all leading to forced sales at below-market prices. He recorded their statements, noting dates and specific incidents. At the gym, Marcus reviewed more security footage. The cameras had captured not just the sparring match, but also conversations before and after. In one clip, Trevor could be clearly heard making provocative comments, challenging Paige despite her polite refusals. Another showed him huddled with gym members after the incident, his body language aggressive as he pressured them to support his story. Master Chen? A quiet voice interrupted his research. It was Sarah Jenkins, one of the members who had given a false statement. I've been thinking about what I wrote, she said, wringing her hands. I want to tell the truth, but Trevor, he threatened to tell my boss about my financial problems. I could lose my job. Marcus gestured for her to sit. I understand your fear, Sarah, but think about what they're doing to Paige. Her whole career, her ability to care for her sick mother, all at risk because of lies. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. I know, I feel terrible, but I have 3 kids to support. What if you weren't alone? Marcus asked. What if others came forward too? Over the next few days, Marcus carefully approached other gym members who had provided false statements. Many expressed guilt about lying, but feared Trevor's threats. Mike Thompson agreed to recant his statement if others would join him. Jason Martinez wavered, torn between truth and the promised help for his brother. While Marcus built his case, Paige's situation grew more dire. The local prosecutor, a close friend of Harrison Garrison, fast-tracked the assault charges. Marcus received updates from Paige's military attorney, who reported mounting pressure from multiple directions. They're pushing for a quick resolution, the attorney told Marcus over the phone. With these witness statements, it's looking bad. She could face discharge and lose her benefits. Her mother needs those medical benefits. Marcus replied, thinking of how Paige had mentioned her mother's worsening condition. How much time do we have? Days, maybe weeks. They're moving unusually fast with this case. Marcus doubled his efforts, working late into the night organizing evidence. But he wasn't the only one watching and gathering information. Strange cars began appearing outside the gym. One morning, he arrived to find his office had been searched, though nothing was stolen. The warnings became more obvious. A building inspector arrived, citing multiple code violations that had never been issues before. The gym's insurance company suddenly required an extensive safety review. Even the local health department showed up, claiming they'd received complaints. "Back off, Chen," a smooth voice said behind him one evening. Marcus turned to find one of Harrison's associates in his parking lot. "You're poking into things that don't concern you." "Everything about my gym concerns me," Marcus replied calmly, though his heart raced. The man smiled without warmth. "Your gym won't exist much longer. Be smart. Take the buyout while it's still offered." Marcus stood his ground, but the encounter shook him. He began making copies of everything, storing evidence in multiple locations. He gave one set to his attorney and another to a trusted friend. Insurance against any attempts to destroy the records. Late one night, as Marcus reviewed another security tape, his phone buzzed with a text from Mike Thompson. "In hospital with Paige. Her mother took a turn for the worse. She's trying to handle legal meetings from the hospital room. This isn't right." Marcus looked at the growing pile of evidence on his desk. Footage showing Trevor's lies, documents revealing Harrison's illegal tactics, statements from business owners detailing years of systematic intimidation. And now, a decorated soldier had to defend herself against false charges while watching her mother slip away. The pressure was mounting from all sides, but Marcus felt more determined than ever. He had spent his life teaching students to stand up for what was right, to defend those who needed help. Now it was time to put those principles into action, no matter the personal cost. He began preparing packets of evidence for the district attorney's office, the local media, and state business regulators. Harrison Garrison had built his empire on intimidation and lies. But Marcus had built his gym on honor and truth, and he intended to prove which foundation was stronger. The gym's security system beeped softly as three dark figures slipped through the back door. Moonlight filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across the training mats. Harrison Garrison's men moved with practiced efficiency, having done this type of work before. "Find the security recordings first," the leader whispered, directing his companions toward Marcus's office. "Then we'll deal with his files." The lock on Marcus's office door gave way easily to their tools. Inside, they found exactly what Harrison had warned them about: stacks of documents detailing years of property acquisitions, witness statements, and security footage archives. "This is everything," one man said, stuffing papers into a black bag. "Chen's been busy. Too busy for his own good," the leader replied, searching for the security system's main hub. None of them heard the front door open. Marcus Chen had forgotten his phone after closing up earlier. He'd driven halfway home before realizing it was still charging in his office. Now, as he entered through the main entrance, he immediately sensed something wrong. Small sounds echoed from his office, shuffling papers, whispered voices. His heart pounding, Marcus moved silently across the training floor, years of martial arts training making his footsteps soundless. As he approached his office, he saw light spilling from beneath the door and shadows moving inside. Marcus pushed the door open, catching the intruders mid-theft. "Step away from those files." The three men spun around. Their leader, a muscular man in dark clothes, smiled coldly. "Master Chen, this could have been much simpler." "Nothing simple about breaking and entering," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "Or destroying evidence." "Evidence of what?" The leader stepped forward, his stance threatening. "Looks like a simple burglary to me. Things get stolen all the time in this neighborhood. Sometimes people get hurt trying to stop it." Marcus shifted his weight, ready to defend himself. "Harrison Garrison sent you to clean up his mess, but there are copies of everything. You can't bury the truth." "We'll start by burying you," the leader snarled, lunging forward with a punch. Marcus blocked the strike, decades of training taking over. But the other two men joined in, and suddenly he was fighting for his life against 3 trained attackers. He managed to dodge their initial rush, creating space to maneuver, but they kept coming. A sharp blow caught Marcus in the ribs. Another glanced off his shoulder. He fought defensively, looking for an opening to escape and call for help. But the men pressed their advantage, forcing him back against the wall. The front door opened again, unnoticed in the chaos. Paige Brennan had driven to the gym almost without thinking, drawn by some instinct she couldn't explain. After another difficult day at the hospital with her mother, she needed somewhere to clear her head. The gym, despite being the source of her current troubles, still felt like a sanctuary. She heard the fighting before she saw it. The sounds of struggle, furniture crashing, men grunting with effort, all coming from Marcus's office. Moving swiftly but cautiously, she approached the open door. Inside, she found Marcus backed against the wall, defending himself against 3 attackers. Papers littered the floor, evidence she realized must be related to her case. One of the men had Marcus by the throat, while another drew back for a finishing blow. Time seemed to slow as Paige stood in the doorway. Everything she'd been fighting for, her military career, her mother's care, her chance at a peaceful civilian life, hinged on avoiding exactly this type of violent confrontation. Getting involved could make her legal situation even worse. But Marcus had believed in her, had investigated on her behalf, had risked his business and safety to uncover the truth. The choice was made in an instant. Let him go. Paige's voice cut through the chaos, commanding attention like a drill sergeant addressing recruits. The men turned, startled by the new threat. Their leader recovered quickly, smirking at the woman in civilian clothes who dared interrupt their work. Walk away, lady, he warned. This isn't your business. You made it my business when you attacked an innocent man. Paige stepped into the office, her movements controlled and precise. Last chance to leave quietly. The leader nodded to one of his men, who rushed toward Paige with clear intent to harm. His attack never landed. In a blur of motion, Paige redirected his momentum, sending him crashing into a filing cabinet. The second man came at her with more caution, but fared no better. Paige's military combat training took over. She moved with lethal efficiency, neutralizing threats without wasted motion. Within seconds, 2 of Harrison's men lay groaning on the floor. Their leader, still holding Marcus, now looked genuinely afraid. You don't want to make an enemy of Harrison Garrison. Harrison Garrison doesn't want to make an enemy of me, Paige replied, her voice deadly calm. Release him, now. The leader hesitated, calculating his odds. Paige took a single step forward, and his nerve broke. He shoved Marcus aside and backed toward the door, then turned and ran. His companions scrambled to their feet and followed, leaving behind their bag of stolen evidence. Marcus rubbed his throat, catching his breath. Thank you, but this could complicate your case. Some things are more important than cases, Paige replied, helping him gather the scattered documents. Like doing what's right. The 3 men spread out across Marcus's office, their confident smirks fading as they assessed their new opponent. Paige noticed their hands moving toward concealed weapons, a knife glinting at one man's belt, another reaching inside his jacket. The third pulled brass knuckles from his pocket. Last warning, Paige said calmly, positioning herself between the attackers and Marcus. Drop your weapons and leave. The first man lunged forward, slashing with his knife. Paige moved like flowing water, redirecting his momentum while simultaneously sweeping his legs. He crashed into a filing cabinet, his knife clattering across the floor. Before he could recover, Paige delivered a precise strike to a pressure point, leaving him gasping and immobile. The man with brass knuckles charged next, throwing wild haymakers that would have devastated an untrained opponent. But Paige had faced worse in combat zones. She ducked under his swing, using his own force against him. In one fluid motion, she trapped his arm and executed a textbook armbar takedown. The brass knuckles fell from his limp fingers as he hit the ground hard. Marcus, get behind the desk, Paige commanded, spotting the third man drawing a small handgun. Marcus dove for cover as the gunman took aim. Paige was already moving, closing the distance before he could steady his shot. She grabbed a nearby training bag, using it as a shield while driving forward. The gun discharged with a muffled pop, silencer equipped, but Paige had anticipated the shot. The bullet embedded harmlessly in the heavy bag as she slammed it into her attacker. The impact drove him backward into the wall. Before he could recover, Paige stripped the weapon from his grip using a disarming technique she'd practiced countless times in Special Forces training. The gun clattered away as she locked him in a chokehold, applying precise pressure until he lost consciousness. "Stay down!" she warned the second man, who was trying to stand. A quick leg sweep put him back on the floor. The first attacker had regained his breath and was scrambling for his dropped knife. Paige kicked it away, then used a wrist lock to control him. "That's enough. It's over." In less than 2 minutes, all 3 armed attackers had been neutralized without any serious injuries. Paige kept them covered while Marcus retrieved zip ties from his office supplies. "The emergency cameras," Marcus said as they secured the men. "They run on a separate system with battery backup. Everything that just happened was recorded." Paige nodded, checking the restraints on Harrison's unconscious associate. "Good. We'll need that footage." "These men work for Harrison Garrison," Marcus explained, gathering scattered papers that had fallen during the fight. "They came for evidence I've collected about his illegal property schemes and the false accusations against you." "They found more than they bargained for," Paige replied, her military training still evident in how she maintained awareness of all 3 subdued attackers while helping Marcus salvage documents. The gym's emergency lights cast harsh shadows across the office as they worked. Papers detailing Harrison's corrupt dealings were scattered everywhere, mixed with security footage recordings and witness statements. Together, they carefully sorted and preserved each piece of evidence that Harrison's men had tried to destroy. "The backup cameras recorded everything," Marcus said, checking the secondary security system. "From them breaking into the fight. It's all documented." Paige examined the unconscious gunman's weapon, expensive, modified, with serial numbers filed off. "This isn't the kind of hardware ordinary thugs carry. This ties directly back to Harrison, along with all the evidence they tried to steal." Marcus agreed. Documents showing how he's pressured other business owners, witness statements about Trevor's false accusations, property records revealing his development plans. They could hear sirens approaching. Someone must have called the police after hearing the commotion. Paige stood guard over their subdued attackers, while Marcus gathered the most crucial evidence into a secure folder. "This vindicates you completely," Marcus said. "The footage shows you defending me against armed attackers. Combined with the evidence about Harrison's schemes and Trevor's lies, it proves you were never the aggressor." Paige remained focused on their captives, her combat training evident in how she positioned herself to watch all approaches to the office. Sometimes the truth needs a little help coming to light. The first police cars arrived outside, their lights painting the gym walls in rotating red and blue. Paige had faced firefights in war zones that felt less intense than these few minutes protecting Marcus and the evidence. But for the first time since the accusations began, she felt the weight lifting from her shoulders. The truth would finally be known. As officers entered the gym, Paige kept her hands visible and her movements slow and deliberate. Her military bearing was evident as she calmly explained the situation. The emergency camera footage would show exactly what happened. A decorated Special Forces operator using her training to protect an innocent civilian from armed attackers while preserving crucial evidence of criminal conspiracy. The truth that would save them both had been captured perfectly by the backup cameras, recorded proof that would expose Harrison's schemes and Trevor's lies while demonstrating why Paige's combat skills made her such an effective Special Forces operator. Sometimes, she reflected, the very abilities that others feared were exactly what was needed to protect the innocent and reveal the truth. Police officers swarmed through Dragon's Den, securing the scene as Detective Sarah Martinez examined the 3 subdued men. Her eyebrows raised at the sight of their expensive clothes and professional-grade weapons. "These aren't ordinary thugs." she noted, studying the modified handgun in an evidence bag. High-end equipment, professional training. Who exactly were they after? Marcus handed her a thick folder of documents. They work for Harrison Garrison. They broke in to destroy evidence of his illegal development schemes and his son Trevor's false accusations against Staff Sergeant Brennan here. Detective Martinez's eyes widened as she reviewed the security footage on Marcus's backup system. The emergency cameras had captured everything in crystal clarity. The break-in, the armed men threatening Marcus, and Page's precise intervention that protected both the evidence and human life. "Exceptional work, Staff Sergeant," Martinez said, watching Page systematically neutralize the armed threats. "This footage alone proves you acted in defense of others against armed attackers." But the cameras had captured even more. Earlier footage showed Trevor's friends discussing their plan to frame Page, their voices clear in the gym's excellent acoustics. "She made Trevor look bad," one student said on the recording. "He says if we don't back his story about her attacking him, his dad will make trouble with our visas." Another clip showed Trevor himself pressuring a gym member. "Just sign the statement." Dad's lawyers wrote it up. "Who do you think the police will believe? All of us, or some random soldier?" Detective Martinez paused the playback. Conspiracy to file false reports, witness intimidation, extortion. This goes way beyond a simple assault charge. More officers arrived with warrants for Harrison Garrison's offices. The evidence Marcus had gathered painted a clear picture of illegal pressure tactics used against local business owners. Threatening letters, recordings of intimidation attempts, property records revealing a pattern of forcing sales through manufactured crises. Harrison Garrison's development company has been using criminal methods to acquire properties, Martinez explained as she coordinated with other units. This gym was just their latest target. Trevor's accusations against you provided cover for their real agenda. Social media exploded as the truth emerged. Local news stations ran footage of Page's defensive action against the armed intruders. Comments that had condemned her just days earlier now praised her courage and skill. The video of her protecting Marcus went viral, with military veterans and martial arts experts analyzing her exceptional technique. Breaking news scrolled across screens. Property developer Harrison Garrison under investigation. Olympic hopeful Trevor Garrison charged with filing false reports. Special Forces soldier stops armed attack at local gym. Trevor's carefully constructed narrative crumbled as his co-conspirators came forward, freed from his threats by the mounting evidence. His girlfriend Brittany provided police with text messages showing how he'd planned to frame Page after she'd embarrassed him in their sparring match. He couldn't handle being beaten by a woman, Brittany told investigators. He said his dad would help him get revenge, make it impossible for her to stay in the military. Harrison's associates began turning on each other as the investigation widened. Company emails revealed systematic use of intimidation against other business owners. The three men Page had subdued quickly offered to testify against their employer in exchange for reduced charges. Detective Martinez updated Page and Marcus as the case unfolded. "The assault charges against you are being dropped immediately, Staff Sergeant. Trevor Garrison is being charged with filing false reports, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. His father's entire operation is under federal investigation now." Marcus watched as forensics teams catalogued evidence from his office. "They tried to destroy my gym to build luxury condos, used Trevor's lies about Page to create bad publicity, pressure my students into leaving. But the truth came out. Sometimes it takes a warrior to protect the peace," Martinez said, nodding respectfully to Page. "Your military training saved more than just Marcus tonight. You exposed corruption that was hurting this whole community." The media narrative transformed completely. Headlines changed from "Dangerous Soldier Attacks Civilian" to "Decorated Special Forces Hero Stops Armed Assault." Military recruitment offices reported increased interest from young women, citing Page as their inspiration. The gym's security footage played on news channels alongside Page's service record, showing how her combat skills had been used to protect rather than harm. Local business owners who had faced pressure from Harrison's company came forward with their stories. A pattern emerged of threats, manufactured code violations, and orchestrated pressure campaigns. The investigation expanded to include multiple properties across the city. The FBI is involved now, Martinez informed them. Harrison Garrison's development company is facing RICO charges. This goes way beyond a few strong-arm tactics. They were running an organized criminal enterprise. Page stood in Marcus's restored office, watching police photographers document the scene. The truth had finally emerged, not through violence, but through the same dedication to protecting others that had guided her military career. Her combat skills had been the key not to destruction, but to preserving evidence that exposed corruption and cleared her name. The courthouse buzzed with activity as Trevor Garrison faced the judge. His designer suit couldn't hide his nervous fidgeting as the charges were read. Filing false reports, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and participation in a criminal enterprise. The Olympic Committee representative sat in the back row, taking careful notes that would determine Trevor's competitive future. "How do you plead?" Judge Thompson asked, her stern gaze fixed on the former martial arts champion. Trevor's voice cracked. "Guilty, Your Honor." In the gallery, Brittany watched with tears in her eyes as her ex-boyfriend accepted responsibility for his crimes. She had already given her statement to prosecutors, detailing how Trevor's wounded pride had led him to construct elaborate lies about Page. Their relationship had ended the moment she discovered the depth of his deception. The defendant's actions were not just an attack on Staff Sergeant Brennan, the prosecutor stated. They were part of a larger criminal conspiracy that victimized numerous small business owners in our community. The judge nodded gravely. "Mr. Garrison, your privileged background and athletic achievements make your actions even more disappointing. You had every advantage, yet chose to participate in criminal behavior to protect your ego." Trevor's sentence came down hard. 18 months in prison, plus substantial fines and community service. The Olympic Committee representative quietly closed his notebook and left. Trevor's dreams of athletic glory disappeared with him. Across town, Harrison Garrison's legal troubles multiplied exponentially. FBI agents carried boxes of documents from his office, while reporters captured every moment. Former victims of his intimidation tactics emerged daily, each with similar stories of threats, manufactured code violations, and orchestrated pressure campaigns. Mr. Garrison used his wealth and connections to create an elaborate criminal enterprise, U.S. Attorney Phillips announced at a press conference. His company systematically targeted small business owners, forcing them to sell their properties through illegal tactics. We've identified over 30 victims so far. Harrison's carefully constructed empire crumbled as investigators froze accounts and seized assets. His business partners scrambled to distance themselves, leaving the once powerful developer to face federal RICO charges alone. At Dragon's Den Martial Arts Academy, Marcus Chen could barely keep up with the flood of new membership applications. The gym's phone rang constantly with calls from people inspired by Page's story. Local news crews captured footage of long lines waiting to sign up for classes. "Your actions didn't just save my business," Marcus told Page as they watched new students file in. "You exposed corruption that was hurting our whole community. People want to train where integrity matters more than profit." The gym's GoFundMe page, started by community members to help offset legal expenses, had exceeded its goal tenfold. Donations poured in from around the country, many accompanied by messages of support for both Marcus and Page. "We've received equipment donations from 3 major manufacturers," Marcus said, showing Page the growing pile of new training gear. "And 6 different martial arts organizations want to host tournaments here. Dragon's Den has become a symbol of standing up against corruption." Page's military superiors had thoroughly reviewed the incident. Colonel Richards personally delivered their findings to the gym. "Staff Sergeant Brennan demonstrated exemplary judgment and skill," he announced, holding up the official report. "She protected civilian life while neutralizing armed threats, exactly as her training prepared her to do. The Army stands firmly behind her actions." The false assault charges against Page were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they could never be filed again. The judge added a formal apology for the distress caused by Trevor's false accusations. Marcus watched Page demonstrating techniques to an enthusiastic group of new students. Her calm professionalism and precise movements perfectly embodied the spirit of his academy. "I'd like you to join us permanently," he said when the class ended. "We need a defensive tactics instructor, someone who understands both the physical skills and the responsibility that comes with them. Your military experience makes you uniquely qualified." Paige considered the offer, looking around at the revitalized gym. The walls now featured news articles about her intervention against Harrison's men, alongside traditional martial arts certificates and tournament trophies. "This place gave me purpose when I needed it most," she said thoughtfully. "Teaching others to protect themselves and their communities, that's a mission I can believe in." Marcus smiled. "You'll have full control over the defensive tactics program. Design it however you think best. We've already got a waiting list of law enforcement and security professionals who want to train with you." The position offered Paige everything she'd been looking for: meaningful work that used her skills to help others, stable employment to support her mother's care, and a chance to build something positive from her combat experience. "When can I start?" she asked. Marcus gestured to the eager students already gathering for her next class. "Looks like you already have." The gym hummed with energy as Paige began instructing her new students. Through the windows, she could see the Dragon's Den Martial Arts Academy, "New Classes Forming Now" banner, drawing more interested people inside. The community had rallied around this place that stood for integrity over profit, truth over deception, and the responsible use of martial skill. Sunlight streamed through Dragon's Den's newly renovated windows as Paige adjusted a student's stance during morning practice. 6 months had passed since she'd accepted Marcus's offer to become the defensive tactics instructor, and the transformation in both the gym and her life felt almost miraculous. "Remember," she said, moving between the rows of focused students, "these techniques aren't about showing off or dominating others. They're about protecting yourself and those who depend on you." Her voice carried the quiet authority that had become her trademark teaching style. The class included an impressive mix: police officers, security professionals, and civilian students all training together. Word had spread quickly about the former Special Forces instructor who brought real-world experience to her teaching, and soon Dragon's Den had a waiting list for her specialized courses. Marcus watched from his office, smiling as he reviewed the gym's latest financial reports. The renovation work was fully paid for, and membership had tripled since Paige joined the team. But more importantly, the gym had developed something priceless: a reputation for excellence and integrity that drew students from across 3 states. After class, Paige checked her phone, finding a message from her mother's nurse. The regular updates had become a comfort rather than a source of anxiety. Thanks to her stable income and improved medical benefits through the gym, her mother had access to better care and experimental treatments that were showing promise. "The doctor says she's responding well to the new medication," Paige told Marcus as they prepared for their afternoon planning session. "Her energy levels are up, and she's even talking about visiting the gym to watch a class." Marcus nodded, genuine warmth in his expression. "She's always welcome here. Your mother's strength clearly runs in the family." They settled into their weekly curriculum review, fine-tuning the unique training approach they'd developed together. Paige's military experience combined with Marcus's traditional martial arts wisdom had created something special, a comprehensive program that emphasized both technical excellence and character development. The police department called again. Marcus mentioned, pulling up an email. "They want to make our defensive tactics certification mandatory for all their officers. Said your training methods have significantly reduced both officer injuries and excessive force complaints." Paige felt a surge of pride. This was exactly what she'd hoped to achieve, using her combat skills to make a positive difference in civilian life. Her curriculum emphasized de-escalation first, with physical techniques as a last resort, all built on the foundation of her real-world experience. "We're also getting interest from other martial arts schools," Marcus continued. "They want to know if we'd consider teaching instructor certification courses. Your approach to integrating military combat experience with civilian self-defense is pretty unique." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the gym as Paige's advanced class practiced complex defensive movements. Among her students, she recognized faces that had been there that first day, when she'd walked in wearing her army combat uniform, looking for a quiet place to decompress. Now they trained under her guidance, learning not just techniques, but the deeper principles of protective strength. "Remember," she called out as they practiced, "true power isn't in dominating others. It's in having the ability to protect and choosing when not to use it." The words reflected her own journey, from hiding her capabilities to understanding how they could serve a greater purpose. During a water break, one of her police officer students approached. "You know, Sergeant, what you're teaching us, it's changing how we approach our work. Last week, I talked down a situation that could have gone bad. Used those awareness principles you taught us." Stories like this had become common. Students regularly shared how the training affected their lives. Security guards who prevented violence through better situational awareness, civilians who gained confidence without aggression, first responders who handled confrontations more safely. After classes ended, Paige and Marcus sat in his office, planning the gym's expansion. The wall behind them displayed both traditional martial arts certificates and military honors, a visual representation of their unified approach. "We're not just teaching fighting skills," Marcus observed. "We're building something bigger, a place where strength serves protection, where capability comes with responsibility." Paige nodded, thinking of her journey from that first evening to now. "I spent so long trying to hide what I could do, thinking it didn't fit with civilian life. But it wasn't my abilities that needed to change. It was how I used them." The gym had become more than a training facility. It was a community hub where law enforcement trained alongside civilians, where combat veterans found purpose teaching others, where strength of character mattered as much as physical skill. Dragon's Den's reputation grew not just for technical excellence, but for the integrity and wisdom of its approach. As evening settled, Paige walked through the quiet gym, appreciating how this space had transformed her life. Her mother was getting better, her skills were helping others. She'd found a way to be both warrior and teacher, protector and guide. The peace she'd sought wasn't in denying her capabilities, but in using them to build something meaningful. Marcus joined her, looking out at the training floor. "You know, when you first walked in that day, I never imagined we'd end up here, but somehow it feels like this was always where we were headed." Paige smiled, watching the last rays of sunlight play across the training mats. She'd found her place, not despite her military background, but because of it. Here, she could be fully herself, using every aspect of her experience to help others grow stronger and wiser. The gym stood as testament to what they'd built together. A place where combat skills served protection, where strength lifted others up, where past experience became future wisdom. Dragon's Den had become exactly what both she and Marcus had always wanted it to be, a sanctuary where true warriors learned to be guardians of peace,